Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? It is Friday, June 7th, or pardon me, June 14th. It's 7 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central. Do you have any idea what's going on in clown world today or this week? Well, this is the only place you're going to get this, folks. We have with us, as we do every Friday, Mr. Bryce Wade, who has the expertise and the privilege of working in the financial sector in a capacity that only makes him successful if he can decipher conspiracy from theory. And this is why it's always an adventure, and you never know what's going to happen when or what we're going to talk about when we get together on a Friday night. But we're gonna, this is episode 13, Bryce, of this now tonight. So we've been at this for a little bit of a while, a little bit of time now, and I think we want the community to be engaged with what we're doing here as well. We want them to prepare questions, with concerns that they might have coming. Because right now, I mean, there's probably a lot of questions that you or I could answer that we're just not prepared for if we don't, have the community engagement. So we do this for the people that are watching so that they can kind of have an idea of the shift of the direction of the financial tides of not just ourselves as individuals, but where our countries and where the world is going. And it's on a scale of 1 to 10, Bryce, what level would you put the insanity at this week in the
Um,
in
well,
the
in the grant
financial sector?
in the financial sector, oh man, it's good, solid seven or eight probably, and so a 10 would be basically 1929 GFC 2007 something like that. So we're up there this week, and let me give you a very simple example why. So this week, so the actually 5 days ago on June 9th, the Saudi Arabians, the Saudis, they stopped the support of the petrodollar. So the petrodollar was basically created by Kissinger in 1974, where he went in there and
all, all of a sudden I don't feel so dumb because this was one of the only things that I had prepped to ask you about was this is going to be kind of leaving a mark kind of thing with what's
this is
going
big.
on here. This is kind of game changing after 50 years of having their way by controlling the dollar. This is going to leave a mark.
Yeah, big time. And so just to finish the background of this, so the genesis of this was the removal of the U.S. dollar from the gold reserve system in 1971. So they needed to generate demand for the U.S. dollar so it didn't collapse or it didn't essentially be devalued and have a whole bunch of inflation. So they generated this synthetic demand for the U.S. dollar through the Saudi Arabian deal, which was on June 9th, 1974. And what that agreement essentially did is it said that Saudi Arabia, will only sell oil in U.S. dollars, and you'll use some of that excess to invest in U.S. Treasuries, which is why George W. Bush used to call his buddy from the Saudis Bandar Bush. I don't know if you remember that from way back in the day. And what that the other side of that was that the U.S. would support the Saudi kingdom and ensure their survival and power in the region. And so what you got from that was that any oil anywhere on the planet that was bought, sold, or used, we essentially had to have US dollars. And so this basically generated unlimited demand for the US dollar. And what's one of the reasons that it's been an unassailable reserve currency for the last 50 years. And so what happened on June 9th this week is that agreement that they made that was 50 years long, they did not renew. And what's happening is that the BRICS countries, of which Saudi Arabia is now a part, they're moving away from dollar hegemony, and eventually this is going to hit the markets. Now, I don't know exactly what this is going to do precisely, but I can tell you one thing: it is not good for the U.S. dollar.
No, and this was interesting because of Mr. Zelensky was just at the G7, being the typical vulture that he was, and the entire G7 in itself is not going well. Even the point, I'm going to try and get a couple of these images that I had pulled over uh, to talk about this, but yeah, when you've got literally the typical mainstream media rags like Politico, talking about the G7 as six lame ducks, and Georgia Maloney meet the G7 2024 class. Maloney in the pink, she was wearing a pink business suit, but in the pink as she consoles procession of dead men walking. It's just, and it just gets worse from there. And so Zelensky had landed in Saudi Arabia and had basically been shuffled out to the door randomly, unannounced, gone to visit the Saudi Arabia, and been told that no, Saudi Arabia was betting on the future with Russia, and this week this is, it doesn't makes absolutely no difference what your opinions or my opinions are, Bryce, on Vladimir Putin. He's made some bold statements this week, and if we ignore him, that's to our own detriment and folly at this point. But this is where I was listening to some guys, and this ties right in. This has to have an impact on the financial sector, what everybody's going through and what's coming next. Where Putin in St. Petersburg was just held this summit, which had more than 21,000 representatives there, is looking at the world and what's on the table and the deals that they're making, and describing Moscow as, quote, and I quote, the capital of the multipolar, multimodal, harmonic trade future. Um, and this is how they're doing business, and together. And this is all part and parcel with Saudi Arabia getting involved in this. More and more nations stepping up to do business with the BRICS nations. It's becoming, um, by the second, I think, a faster factor, or mitigating factor on the crushing that's going on here. It's like the submarine that's getting too deep, and the deeper they get, the faster they implode.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of stuff happening around the world, and especially when in regards to the economy, like there's seismic shifts happening, and one of them is demographics, right? So demographics is there's old saying, demographics is destiny, right? And the vast majority of the world is now birth rate negative, right? So not below replacement levels, right? So they're declining. China being chief among them, South Korea. Basically right up there as well, Japan, a lot of the Western world as well. And so about the only place that is stable to some degree is Mexico. India is still positive. There's a couple places in Eastern Europe, a couple places in Africa, and a couple places in the Arabian Peninsula. And that's it. Everywhere else is negative, right? And so what that means, looking down the line a little bit, is that our current economic model will not support that, because we're all based on growth, right? So in a world of decline, of like declining birth rates and less people to build, if you have to support a whole bunch of people that are near the end of their life, no offense, old people, right? But there's an economic and a mathematical equation to that. If you have a whole bunch of people that are old and not enough people that are doing work to support them, well, that doesn't work long term, right? And this is kind of what China is facing right now in very stark terms. But it's also what Germany is facing, and France, and most other industrialized nations, not the least of which Canada. And this is the only reason that we have a positive population growth right now, is from immigration.
Yeah, and this brings up something else that I don't think anybody could have guessed. I mean, they could have guessed, but it's coming out through some reports here now, through the financial sector, now that the international central banks and the IMF have had to take a more real look at the gradings and the financial power of different nations, and have come out with basically an apology statement saying, "Oops, we miscalculated. We didn't factor this, and the economy of Russia is actually more than five times growing more than 5 times faster than what we had accounted for, and they've become, this, they're growing at a rate that's faster than, including sanctions, according to, to what they've been working on as far as for numbers. There's a real discrepancy, and I think what they're doing here, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up, is it affects how these guys are, both sides leveraging the narrative as to where the future is going to be. But they're losing the war in Ukraine really, really badly, and they cannot figure out why. So they're looking at scapegoats, and this is going to be one of the reasons why they're going to use to try and get out of this situation, I believe, is to say, "Oops, we just miscalculated. We better just put the brakes on some of the stuff that we're doing in some of these conflict zones, because they don't have an off ramp for the Ukraine, and that's really what's driving the incredibly hard shift, as they call it, to the far right on the international spectrum. So they can't get out of that in any other way without looking like the bad guys. So that's, I think, what they're angling up to with that.
Potentially, I don't know. I fully agree with that, and let me give you a couple data points on why I don't agree with that. So you mentioned the economy of Russia. So Russia is now on full war footing, fully, basically one step down from full mobilization of all war economy.
Has
So they're
been since July of 2022.
Yeah, exactly. Not quite. They went full mobilize. They went full war economy last year, and so they started to mobilize and start ramping up in 2022 because that's when they invaded, and so they hit full war footing last year, because I remember reading about this. And so what that means basically is that typically in peacetime you have a very small amount of your GDP put towards military, right? Because you're essentially just maintaining, right? Full war is, this is survival. Now this is, let's go, everybody. And so that
Mhm.
means that you massively increase the amount of money that you're spending on the military. And that is not that's a fake GDP, right? Because you're essentially spending resources that are getting blown up, right? So it's a waste of resources and energy and time and manpower and life and all the other good stuff that we like in peacetime. And so there's a false positive, if you want to call it that, or if that makes sense, that the Russian economy is doing really well in some instances. Yes, they're producing stuff, but they're losing a lot of very important things, not the least of which their oil production. And even though they have the ability to sell it kind of outside of US sanctions, their economy is not set up in a way that it can handle not being connected to the globe, right? And there's a lot of technology that was being used in Russia that was from the West that's now not there. And so some of their industries are suffering from that. But the more important piece of that is that when you dedicate your economy to war, you lose some of it. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't happen that has to get put to the side because you're trying to fight a war. And so I don't think they're really doing that well. They're surviving and they're fighting a war. You've got to credit where credit's due, but it's not sustainable long term. Like, you can't go full war economy forever. It just doesn't work. And we're only at the beginning of this war. So, I don't know how much we can survive, because we haven't even gone anywhere near full war economy. Some people believe we're not even at war yet. So I mean, what do you even say to that? But the ultimate point I'm making is that the economic indicators that are important to a society, education, growth, healthcare, population growth, and energy production, all this sort of good stuff, food production, not the, very, very important in that calculation. All that stuff is going down, right? Because you're fighting a war. And the same thing is going to happen to us. And we're not even in a war yet, really. Like Canada hasn't felt this, the US hasn't felt this yet. But we're at war, even though we're not acting like we're at war. And so that is very problematic for our side too.
Well, that denial of reality, I think, is our biggest problem.
Big time.
We Our society still thinks of war as John Wayne and the Green Berets movie, or those kinds of things, and the socio-economic biowarfare. All of these things combined make up the sixth, the unrestricted warfare that's actually waging, and it's been escalating. The boundaries that have been crossed even here recently make the Cuban Missile Crisis the first time look like nervous children. So this is the reality of it. They don't want to admit, or the reality of, or perhaps even the fact that it's been said that Putin is legitimately declared many of our Western nations as legitimate targets of war if we go by this standard, rules of war. And it's we don't want to realize that it's by somebody, at least one adult in the room, having the patience to realize maybe not all of the people over here are batshit cray cray, for lack of a better term, and we don't really want this for just a bunch of witting, useful idiots and accomplices in the regions of power. So this he's that is I don't think he really wants this conflict to get any worse than what it is, and he's kind of really should have shown us over the last couple of weeks with what's going on in Cuba, and our measly little navigation vessel and a submarine showing up after they've left. None of this speaks to power and deterrence and even being taken legitimately when we could literally be taken out if they so wanted to. And I think that it comes down to one of the most significant interferences in American freedom. It's not really going to make the news a lot, is what they did to Scott Ritter, because of the message that he was going to St. Petersburg, said conference, to deliver, that the American people are not at war with Russia, and they're starting to wake up and realize that this needs to stop, this needs to end. And Putin's come out with a 9-point structure for an official an end to the conflict, shall we say. But
I read that. Yeah, I read that today. It's
yeah,
not completely unreasonable like some fools are saying.
right, exactly. And I'm going to do some
Eh,
deep reporting on that here next week, Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to pick it apart and look into more specifically some of the statements and the words that he used that are incredibly significant to the situation that we're in. And it's really up to us in how we respond to this and prepare ourselves accordingly.
Yeah, and
End of the
if
day.
I may, there's a couple things that I think that are significant about that. Not the least of which that Putin is again giving the West a very stark warning, like straighten up and fly right, or we're going to get a serious war. But one of the things that everybody has to kind of realize is that we are a hair's breadth away from an actual nuclear strike of some sort. Now we've talked kind of individually about the escalate to de-escalate sort of situation where they drop a nuke somewhere to be like, yo, we can do this. Just try to remind you that we have nukes and a whole bunch that we can fire at your ass, right? But I don't think that's the important part. One of the important things that's happening right now is the F-16s that are in Europe right now, which are and the F-35s. They have lots of air power deployed in Europe right now, and all of those fighters are nuclear capable deployment platforms. And so Russia has already said that if I see an F-16 in Ukraine or anywhere for that matter that's coming at me, I'm gonna blow it out of the sky because it could have a
Right,
nuke on it, right? And the
right.
more let me finish this point. I'm going to give it
Yeah,
back to you. And so the important point of this is that each one of these F-16s are not coming from Ukraine because they bombed all the runways that these things would fly out of. So what that means is that the F-16s that supposedly have Ukrainian fighter pilots, which obviously don't, because there's a whole bunch of F-16 fighter pilots have been flying this thing for 20 years. Why would you use them? They're NATO pilots and NATO planes with potentially NATO nukes coming at Russia and fighting in Ukraine, right? So the Russians look at that as like, yo, this is a nuclear threat. We're gonna view it as that, and so we're gonna blow them out of the sky. And this is, for lack of a better term, a kinetic start to World War III whenever that starts. And my real concern, and I'll just end with this, is that my real concern to bring this back to Canada is that when this kinetic war actually starts in earnest with Russia directly, and so Article 5 gets triggered or whatever, Trudeau is gonna, in his infinite authoritarianism, like throw down the EMA, roll out martial law, and seize power and never let it go. Because I don't believe for a second that idiot can get us through World War III. He can't even. I wouldn't trust him to manage a popsicle stand.
He couldn't organize a fart competition at a bean festival. Um, he legitimately could not. I had a clip. I forgot to pull it up on how Jordan Peterson had recently addressed the level of his lack of intelligence. And
It's pretty funny.
Jordan Peterson fan or not aside, it's pretty accurate as to the lack of intellect that this meat Muppet. That's the most kind thing I can say about him is he's a meat Muppet. Anyways, no, I almost lost my train of thought. Now, kind of the reason why I kind of wanted to circle around all of this is the rest of the world is getting more organized into uh, you know a working uh degree of modicum around a multipolar world. They're done with this new world order, and nation by nation by nation, they're looking at the decay of ours and where where they're going to where it's going to be the best interests for their nations. This new one world rules based order is dead on its feet, and we've still got these meat muppets here in Canada, the Freelands and the Trudeaus, that are in full on denial about all of these shenanigans that are going on, and they're still trying to spin it. And this is where it comes back to the World War III, the what's coming in the financial sector, and again, this alleged shift to the far hard Nazi National Socialist right, just because their radical left is kind of. I mean, they're not even all gone or all out of power yet, but they're blaming the wrong triggers and the wrong mechanisms so that they can ultimately, at the end of the day, try and narrate their way out of the reality of this situation. And a big part of it has to do with that conflict in Ukraine. Giorgia Meloni said, Italy said, no soldiers, no boys, no men. That's the biggest moving factor of why the needle is moving so fast, so quickly this year in the elections over there. The over in Europe. We talked about this in the past with 47% of the world's planet going into elections this year, expecting this to happen, this correction, because insanity is unsustainable. We see now with Saudi Arabia saying, "Yeah, no, we're seeking pastures elsewhere because they can." Biden is you can't keep clean pants at the Normandy events, and Trudeau is there with little Napoleon 13.0, representing the fascist regime rather than anybody that actually had meaning to these commemorations. But at the end of the day, it's like those articles, this all of these people and entities and world leaders are collapsing. They're dead men walking in their nations and their power, and this continuation of this shift correction to a more reasonable you operational status of the world is going to have ever escalating impacts on our financial situation, if I'm not crazy.
Yeah, and so if anybody doesn't know that's watching this, there was a huge amount of elections that happened last weekend in Europe, not the least of which France, and France's kind of far right party, as it's known. But just remember that anything right of communist is now far right. And so the Marianne Le Pen basically crushed Macron's party to the point where he called a snap election, and so he's probably going to get trounced in the polls. Or in the next election, although he might stay on as the president because of the way that their system works, which is kind of unique in Europe. But just overall, there's a lot of people that are moving right, myself included. I consider myself a centrist, but I have to vote with the conservatives now because they're the only people using math. And anybody that doesn't use math, you shouldn't even be able to be in politics. You can't lie through your teeth and just be like, "Hey, 7 + 2 is 92." Like it's just It's unbelievable. And so what's happening right now in the kind of in the West in general is everybody that isn't a communist or an idiot has noticed, be like, yo, these guys are out to lunch without any food, right? And we have to do something about that. And this is kind of one of the things that I wanted to cover today briefly, is that I talk a lot about like, do something about this. If you recognize that there's a problem, you can't leave it to the people that are already screwing you to fix the problem that they created, right? So what does that look like, and how do we do something about it? And this is one of the things that I did recently. So I put together a presentation to show people, like, this is the what do you call it, the genesis, the framework of change. And so this simple process that is the idea that I like to push now is that the hand of change starts with you, right? Everybody's got a hand, and your grasp on reality kind of dictates what kind of change that you can bring to the table. And so this is very simple process: questions, answers, actions, results, and ultimately your choices within those, right? So you can start with the result that you have, or you can start with the result that you want, and you say, this is the thing that I want, or this is the thing that I don't want. How am I going to get the thing that I do want, or mitigate or reduce or remove the thing that I don't want? So the next step is, what are the actions required to do whatever that is? And to understand and decide what those actions are, you have to ask a whole bunch of really good questions, get some really good data and answers, and then make a decision, make a choice. And so that's what the hand of changes. And this applies to anybody, anywhere, at all times. You don't have to be a leader. As I should say, you don't have to be a politician. You just be somebody in your community. Like, hey, this is a problem that we all face. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to fix this? Right? And that's the genesis of all change in society for all time. Bunch of people got together and say, this is bullshit. What are we going to do about it? Let's take action. And then they do. That is the genesis of all change for all time.
We had Tom Marazzo on the program the other
Oh,
night,
nice. Yeah, good guy.
and yeah, that's what he's been out of the spotlight for a while, and very busy helping communities fortify themselves and teaching people how to do this strategically, protect their communities and the real world, not what they're squealing or squawking about on in the Avatar universe. And so there's some great tips and information, and exactly that. At the end of the day, we get to decide, provided there isn't a nuclear event, because it's not a war. There's no such thing as a nuclear war at this point. I think it's game over, and these meat muppets, I think that they can survive it, but it's all happening way too soon, so they don't want to do that. So we're not going to get there. But that's the charade of the politics and the insanity that we're so far still participating in, because we haven't fully restructured ourselves to not give two shits what's going on in other parts of the world, because it doesn't apply or matter to us. We need to get back to that. So all of this aside, when you see Freeland out here, bragging up Canada has a triple A credit score, and they're talking about interest rates dropping. What's the reality of that scope here right now, Bryce? And what should people be thinking about over the next 30 days when it comes to how any of those conversations might affect them? What does a AAA rating and interest rates discussions, what impact that does that have on the general people of Canada, and what do they have to see as the lie in this? Because if the Liberals' lips or Freeland's mouth is moving, there's a lie in that, and they're looking to extract something out of us somewhere else somehow. So does that question make sense?
Yeah. So it's kind of a wide question. So let me give you a couple things that are relevant to that. So first and foremost is what the hell is a AAA credit rating, right? And so first of all, it's basically a rating for how good, for how well you can repay debt, more or less. So if you remember back to The Big Short, right? The Big Short kind of talked about CDOs, which are credit default, credit default, something, whatever they were. Basically, they were insurance on mortgages. They were mortgage-backed securities, is what those were, right? And so they packaged them all into different levels. So you had the high-risk ones that were like CBs and double Bs and all this sort of garbage, right? And then you had AAA credit rating, which is like, low loan to value ratio, had lots of money in the bank, like somebody that paid on time every time for 10 years going way back. So you had these different levels of types of debt, essentially. And so what that allows you to do is you get better rates, right? So if somebody comes to you and say, hey, what's your credit rating? Just like we have a personal credit rating. If you have a bad number, well, you don't get as good rates and you're high risk and you can't get what you want sometimes, or they might not even accept you, right? And so if you remember also back into the Big Short, that was manipulated. So it took like almost 6 months or 8 months or 9 months, I can't remember how many months, into the financial crisis before they started changing the credit ratings of some of this absolute dog shit. So I don't believe to a certain degree that we're actually sitting at a AAA credit rating after we've doubled our debt.
I don't either.
And it's literally what it speaks to me, just like the decline of the interest rate by 0.25%, even though inflation isn't anywhere near under control, is that somebody talked to them and said, hey, we got to like lower this, we need a win, lower it so that we can have a win and everything doesn't collapse. So like, yeah, we get a little bit of a reprieve, but the underlying problems that they caused in the first place have not been fixed by this, right? And they're just looking for something they can point to. And if you look at all of the things that you can analyze or measure in our economy, how many people are going to the food bank, how much money everybody has, how many people want to live here, how many people can afford to live here, the affordability of food, the affordability of rental, the affordability of mortgages and money and cars and blah, blah, blah. Like literally nobody in this country except utter idiots and Chrystia Freeland thinks that Canada's economy is doing well. We have the lowest growth in the G7 now, and so this is the type of stuff that matters to us, the people, because like at this very high level, oh, we have a great credit rating. Who cares? What does that have to do with anybody in the economy other than the super high level financial people, right? Yes, it's good for our economy because we can get borrowing for the country, but Chrystia Freeland wants to increase our debt limit to $2.1 trillion, even though we're only sitting at 1.3, 1.2, somewhere in there right now. She wants to print another $800 billion. Do you think our credit rating is going to be super good then? And the thing that grinds my gears most about this is these idiots don't even know how to utilize that credit rating, because what they did is like normally when you're gonna take out like ungodly amounts of money at a loan, you get the lowest credit rate or lowest interest rate that you possibly can. And instead of getting a super long duration, like 10, 20, 30 year term for the loans, they pulled, I think they got like a 1 or 2 or 3 year loan before, when the interest rate was super low at like historic lows. They could have gotten and locked in that rate, but now we have to refinance a lot of that debt, which means our debt payments are going to go up. How could you be that incompetent as the deputy minister of Canada and as specifically the financial minister? So like, even though she's saying, look, oh, we're doing so good, we got a AAA credit rating, you didn't even take advantage of it, which is the most ridiculous thing ever, because you obviously know what it means. You know what it gives Canada, which is better rates, but you didn't even take advantage of them. So like, what are we even talking about? It's so stupid, bro. And all it takes is for anybody to verify this is go look at the data. Like these people have printed double our national debt in 4 years. And you didn't even get the amazing rates that we had that caused us to have the ability to do that in the first place. Like, these people are so unbelievably incompetent, man. It's intentional. To me, it's intentional. It cannot be anything other than intentional to be this incompetent.
Well, yeah. I don't generally have these conversations, or I never did for the bulk of my life, because I was interested in this stuff, or I knew anything about it. But even I could smell the rotten cheese in Denmark, and knew I needed to learn more about this and have more discussions about this. This was, ultimately why I wanted to have these discussions. There's a lot of people out there that are just like me, and I intentionally kind of softball the broad question in there like that for you, so that you could explain a little more in depth, rather than me try to fumble around and ask stupid questions. So, thank you for telling us how that really works. That for those that don't really understand it. But so the average person paying their mortgage, listening to the banks, debate and use up news time about the squabble. Are they going to lower interest rates? Are they not going to lower interest rates? And Christopher Freeland is saying sunshine and the lollipops, AAA. What does that make? What does this mean to the person that's watching their mortgage payments go up by leaps and bounds? That's you know putting them in the food banks and in tent cities that are spreading it for everywhere. How fast is this escalating, and what do you think the prognosis of what these people that are in these situations where they're asking these maybe dumb questions? What do they have to look at and prepare for the next 90 days, 60 days, the next year until we get into an election here and maybe get a reprieve?
Well, I think the change in the petrodollar has more impact on us right now than our AAA credit rating, because that's a very important economic mover and shaker of the underlying economy, right? Because it was a core impetus of the value of the U.S. dollar that created demand for it. And so if there's less demand, and essentially if there's less demand for a currency, less people buy it and it's worth less. So you can't print as much, right? Because we're the U.S., the Americans, our friends, are printing ungodly amounts of money on a regular basis, like $1 trillion every 90 days or some ridiculous number like that. And eventually they're not going to be able to do that because nobody's going to buy their U.S. treasuries, right? And so that's the danger of what the petrodollar means, is that if you don't have buyers for your currency collapses. And so I think we're heading into, and this was we talked about this recently. There's a lot of banks that are insolvent. Actually, let me show you this, because I think let me put this into perfect perspective for you, because we talked about this a little bit, because this will show you in very stark contrast where we are right now and what to expect soon. So let me
Well,
just pull this up.
I'm hoping, and I want to make the parallels to this while you're pulling that up. I'll just need a minute here. With Biden's commitment for 10 years of funding for Ukraine's for security and rebuild, but basically it's printed money that Japan and the EU is on the hook for. And this is one of their beefs, because they're saying, wait a minute, if Ukraine doesn't pay this debt back on this deal that Biden's brokering, we're going to be stuck with it. How does this make any damn sense?
Oh,
Right?
the government, the state is actually backing up a whole bunch of mortgages too, and we're going to be taking on the risk. So I'll swing around back to that. So this, what you're looking at, so the BTFP. So this is the Bank Term Funding Program. Now I talked a lot about this probably a couple months ago. So this ended on March 11th, and so essentially what this was, if you remember last year, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. Right, the reason that Silicon Bank collapsed was this. This is all of the unrealized losses that essentially they were sitting on because the bond price changes. So that increase in the interest rate basically inverted a whole bunch of bonds and made them be valued less. So when they needed the liquidity and they had to sell those on the open market, they weren't worth as much, because why would I buy your garbage when I can get a better rate buying a brand new one? Is basically the summary of how that worked. And so so this is 2008. This is like the unrealized losses, right, in these securities. This is what we're sitting on now. And because of this, there's a huge amount of banks that are now insolvent, like that are just not going to survive. They're pumping money into the system to try and push this off. And I'm sure it's partially because we're at war with the East right now, and they're trying to protect the currency. But like, you got to understand how complex this stuff is. Like, me as a person sitting in Vancouver, you people in other places in Canada, right? We're just living our lives. Like, we have this little amount of transactions that we do that keep everything moving in our local area. But when you compare that to hundreds of billions of dollars sloshing around the economy and doing all this crazy stuff, and the banks that are supposed to be administrating this stuff are collapsing or insolvent or worse, it's not going to work. It's not sustainable. And the thing that I want to show you is this. So I've shown you this before, right? So this left side is what the run up to the 1929 depression looked like, right? So this big, big going up, right? And then it big came down, right? And this is what this was last year, right? So this is what we looked at last year. Now this is an analysis and a kind of an overlay from the 1929 to what we're at now, and we're sitting up here, right? So there's been a
Right.
whole bunch of economists, there's been a whole bunch of people, there's lots of people in my industry and gold and silver that are predicting this is what's going to happen. Now, this is the part that I want to show you. Okay, so this looks bad, right? That looks bad. That part that I just showed you is just this. Just that part right there is just what I showed you right there. And so this 90% correction, and I saw something on Timcast today that there's another economist that came out yesterday, the day before, that said we're looking at another depression-like decline in the stock market because of all of this debt. Like, we've printed so much money that it's gone into somebody's pocket. Where's all this money gone, right? Well, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard have $25 trillion. Where all this money go? Oh, I just don't know. It's ridiculous, right? And so what this means, and what this ultimately means to everybody watching this, is at some point things are going to break, because this system is just not sustainable, right? If you continue to print money and print money and print money and print money at interest that you owe interest to, there's not enough money in the economy to pay for the debt, right? To pay for the interest, right? And so sooner or later something breaks and it falls over. And this has happened thousands of times throughout history, and it's going to happen again. And this is why I keep saying this: is that the ultimate goal here is not for World War III or whatever. It's a means to an end. The ultimate goal is to have everybody on a central bank digital currency with a digital ID, so they can be absolutely controlled. And this is, I think, one of their answers to the BRICS nation, is if we can control all transactions and make sure that money goes somewhere to pay for things that we need, we can literally directly control the economy. Okay, and to accomplish that goal, to roll out central bank digital currencies globally, you have to destroy the US dollar, because it's in the way. So how are they going to do that? Probably like this.
So the
I'm sorry,
report that
I
I
didn't
saw.
mean. I'm sorry, I missed the comment that you pulled up.
Oh, basically that's the process to where we're going. Bankrupt us all, seize our property, give it to asylum seekers, and then see us watch the melee in the streets.
Yeah.
So you thank you for that. I think people, first of all, need to like, subscribe, and share this. But this is important is to understand. I'll bring this up for next week, but I saw a report a couple of days ago, and I was like, this is scary beyond comprehension. I wanted to ask you about this, but I got a report of at least 63 more banks expected to collapse in the next week or two. Is that out of line of expectation? And
No, I'm
if it
surprised they haven't
isn't,
already.
okay, and so then is this Saudi situation just another straw on the camel's back of these
Yeah.
banks? And again, over what's potentially possible over the next 2 to 3 weeks, whatever that might be, even if it's 4 weeks, 63 banks collapsing. Does that basically leave us all like this, meleeing in the streets? What does that look like in the real world, or world that that John Q. Public lives in here right now in Canada, Bryce?
Yeah, great question. This is kind of why I always try to contextualize everything that I say in relation to you personally, you, the person watching this, right? You are a physical person in a physical place with physical requirements. That's food, water, energy, heat, communication, a loving touch of somebody you care about, whatever those things are. And I have another slide that I'll bring up a second. But you have these core requirements in civilization, right? That basically allow us to live a modern life, right? And a lot of that is predicated on cheap energy. Well, we're losing cheap energy, right?
Yes.
Canada
Energy is
has the
freedom. That's
it,
prosperity in the
it
modern
is.
age, and in any nation.
Right. And there's a lot of far left lunatics that are trying to destroy that in the West. They are succeeding right now. The oil and gas is under attack. I don't particularly like oil and gas, but I'm not dumb. I know that our civilization runs on it. If we don't have it, we die. It's very simple math. So, like, it really frustrates me with the people that are like, oh, I'm going to save the planet and stuff. How? What are you going to do? And is your answer is solar and wind? Like, it's just so unbelievably mathematically illiterate. So my point in this, and this is what I always say, is that if you think that these problems are coming down the pipeline, and they are, what are you going to do to protect yourself and your family? And the number one thing I always say is food. You have to have enough food, right? At sooner or later, and I can tell you this because it's going to happen with gold and silver too, is that someday something is going to happen, and people are going to realize that, like, oh shit, I need to protect my family. I don't have enough right now, and all the stuff that would, like, our economy is built on, marketing and all of these superfluous technologies and stuff, it's all going to go by the wayside, and people are going to be like, where's my food, where's my ammo, where's my protection, and what do I got to do for the next, like, 90 days, which is a good way to think about that. What am I going to do for the next 90 days, right? And I've already been building up to this for, like, the last year or so, because I know this is coming, right? And I encourage everybody else out there too to get at least minimum 90 days. You want to get long-term storage and stuff and make sure that your family is safe. But at the end of the day, it is going to be things in your local area that guarantee what you're able to protect yourself with, right? Because remember, if you're in a city anywhere, it doesn't matter what the city is, this applies to all cities everywhere. Your city is food negative, right? So if let's I'll give you a perfect example of what could happen, right? Let's say that the petrodollar collapses and the price for oil skyrockets to like $200 a barrel or something like that. And with current prices, that's like a doubling or a tripling of the price of gasoline right now. So if you have to spend, like 3 times as much money to move food from one place to another, well, less is going to move, and it's going to be a lot more expensive. So if you have the money to buy food, great, it'll be a lot more expensive. But if you don't have the money, well, you don't have any food. And what does that usually mean for people? Well, I'm going to take that food, right? Because people are going to be like, well, I have to feed my family, and if you have some and I don't, give me some. And if you say no, well, screw you, I'm going to fight you for it then, right? And that is the decline of civilization, where people don't adhere to the rule of law anymore, and they say, hey, everything is so screwed and so off the rails and off the cliff that I've got to take care of me and myself and myself only, right? And so what this means to you personally is that at some point things are going to start breaking. And so what I always recommend people is, if you think that these are problems, you better prepare yourself. Go get cash out, go get gold and silver, go get food, go get protection, go get out of the city. Make sure your job is something that's going to be valuable. Make sure that you've got skills that are going to be valuable. Make sure you have assets that are going to be valuable. Make sure you have resources that are going to be valuable, right? You have to plan for this as if the example that I give is, that old saying, keeping it on the rails, right? So on one hand, on the one rail, right, you have the rail of normal society. I'm going and investing in my 401k, or I'm planning for the future and I'm going to retire soon, or whatever. I'm going to get my career and I'm going to go back to school or whatever. That's living in society. That's on the straight and narrow, trying to be a good citizen, right? The other side of that, and the other rail, is shit's crazy, shit's collapsing, and I've got to be prepared for the apocalypse, because that's also what's happening. Now, we don't know how far one way or the other that's going to go, but if you don't prepare for both, you lose on both, right? So you have to have one foot in one side and one foot on the other side, going down those rails and preparing for what is going to be, for everybody, very tough times. Even if we have the best leaders possible, these problems are systematic, they're institutional, they are core, they are fundamental to how our civilization operates. And I haven't even talked about AI or the other massive problems that we have, right? I
We've
haven't
talked
even
about
covered
some of
everything.
those things earlier this week.
Yeah.
There, guys. If you're have missed what's been going on What's Up Canada this week, we're up back to a consistent Monday to Friday, 6 o'clock Central. We are covering some unbelievable stories, some deep dive exposés, blowing out some exclusive stories, and some amazing guests, and then capping it off with Bryce on Fridays. So make sure that you share this, get subscribed. And after the shows, I publish everything on Substack, the receipts for everything that we talk about typically on the shows. Bryce uses Miro. So if you want to get plugged into kind of more of the action side of this, and have a little bit more, specific questions, things like that, but you're going to start hearing a whole bunch of, if you haven't noticed, the smartest people that I know all seem to be singing the same song, just from slightly different echoes and tones and keys. So this is there's a lot to what we're talking about. And developed community, a strong community, is the best asset you can have to a strong, secure self. So if you're doing okay, help your community get stronger, find out what you need, fill in the blanks. Everybody's got skills. Do this while you can, so you're not stuck in a crisis that they will absolutely leverage into something permanent, like water issues in Calgary, which are now justification for permanent water restrictions on every citizen in Calgary. Like,
Do you mean?
what? What? This is kind of what they do. They manufacture crisis in everyday lives and innocuously come up with a solution to fix it permanently. Uh-huh. That's kind of how it goes. So, a lot going on. You got another side to pull up here. There we go. Perfect.
Yes.
Four
so,
pillars
so
of enslavement.
Yeah, so this is kind of the one thing that I like to make sure that everybody really understands. The ultimate goal is these four pillars of enslavement. There's a couple other things beyond this, but this is the core, right? These four things are what we have to fight against, right? And anybody that supports any of them, anybody that supports or advocates for the decline of farming or takes any action against farmers, the people that are growing our food, are enemies of humanity. They're either too dumb to be in their position, or they're maliciously trying to destroy the people that they're supposed to be representing. One of the two. And so the reason I brought this up is that I talked to one of my one of the, because I live in Vancouver, so I talked to one of the MPs that's running for the Conservative Party, and so I know that a lot of people are very disenfranchised with the political system, and I totally get that. But at the end of the day, this is a war, okay? And I'll leave off with this, and then you can take it over. But like, this is a war for survival. This is a war for you and your family to be protected or to be destroyed. And if you're not fighting that on every front possible, you're losing on that front. If you are aware of these problems and you think like, hey, this is a problem, this guy's a problem, well, you have to do something about it, right? You have to add your voice to the chorus of people like me and Wayne here. There's like, these people are idiots. They got to go. They're destroying our civilization, and could give lots of information and lots of evidence, right? Not everybody's eloquent. Not everybody's a fighter. Not everybody's a political person, but everybody can do something. Like, if you're doing nothing, you're failing yourself and your family. And so I can't stress this enough, is that we are running out of time. Because at some point, some black swan nonsense bullshit event is going to happen. Maybe it's COVID, maybe or COVID 2.0 or pandemic or like a collapse or a war, or it literally doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that you and people in your community are taking steps to protect you and your community. Because at the end of the day, the people that are in charge of everything don't give a shit about you. And if you want to survive this, you've got to be the person that's going to safeguard yourself and your family.
I couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, I've been having a lot of discussions with different group leaders, thought leaders on different things that are absolutely important matters, but they're not pillar or cornerstone issues that we have the time to engage in right here, right now.
Yeah.
And so um, I'm trying to help people, on a broader spectrum, gets to implementing within their own discernment. For me, it's the principle of fives. For whatever works for anybody else, there is great. If my energy, my investment, my time is not going to make a difference in 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. That allows me to scale the energy and input that I have available, because resources are slim. Ammunition is flying both directions in this information war, which is the battlefield that I'm currently involved in, while I'm
Yep.
trying to prepare the people behind
Oh,
us. And those are the things that help me stay in alignment to things that are actually capable of having an impact. This is where I want to help people get a clearer picture in the fog and smoke of war. The difference between, this is something we've talked about. People are being inundated with so much, and that's kind of by design. Some of
yep.
it's through good intent, but there's so much noise, so much news, so much education, so much fluff, so much candy, so much propaganda, disinformation, infiltration, all of these things going on, that it's critical to understand the people that are bringing the receipts for the work that they're doing, and getting plugged into those people, and still using your discernment, because there's still deception at a lot of levels and a lot to keep us confused. But ask yourself, given the rate and the speed at which you're seeing this escalate, where on the time spectrum of fives do you think the activist, the cause, the purpose, the event that's in your face trying to get your attention, um, where should that be on your priority list? So I'll bring up your treat, your
Yeah, I was gonna circle back to this. I forgot to bring it up, but this is kind of what I was mentioning: is that civilization is like the spider web, right? You have these very important things that happen in the center of the spider web where you sit, right? But the spider web collapses if you take out any of those top level outside connections to actual reality, right? And so what this is really pointing towards is that these are the things in our society that are pillars of society. If you take any of these things out, some major things break, and there's a couple. It's these bottom three here. These are the most important ones. If you lose energy, if you lose water, or you lose food, you die. It's that simple, and especially in a cold country like us, right? In some places, energy isn't that important. At least it's sunny every day and whatever, right? But in a place like this, in Canada, you die in the winter if you don't have energy. And so what this is really pointing towards is that this is the things that you have to safeguard in society, and every single one of these things is under attack by the insane communist left.
100% agree. And there, we have to start being more focused with our lenses. We got to start citing
Yep.
things in a little
Focus
bit.
and prioritize.
Yep, yeah, and I'm seeing this as an opportunity, as these things come to the Overton window, where we've had insight for a longer period of time,
Yeah.
where now, as these conversations cycle back to being of importance in that critical time series space, right now we can help adjust the focus, and it's times like right now where every politician in Canada that's seeking either a re-election or an election has their nose in the air watching the political winds. So this is the time for us to be concise, accurate, and noisy in the public space as to adjusting how these conversations move forward, thinking about which ones we want next and how can we rationalize and direct the discussion that's going on in the public space in the Overton window. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and my apologies for pushing this out, but I think this is really important that I forgot to mention earlier. But the Overton window. So we mentioned the Overton window. So the Trudeau Liberals and Jagmeet Singh, everybody is talking about treason and traitors now, and so those words have entered the Overton window because everybody is
Yes.
pissed that Trudeau is not releasing the names of the people in our parliament that are guilty of working with foreign powers, not the least of which Chrystia Freeland herself, which is on the board of trustees for the WEF. So let's put that aside for a second, but that is literally the definition of foreign influence. Okay, so putting that aside for a second, right? There is tons of people, and what I think is going to happen with this is I think they're going to frame it like Pierre Poilievre is guilty of collusion with India or some absolute nonsense like that.
Oh, he's courting incels now.
It's so stupid, bro. These people are so transparently dumb, and this is why I'm so frustrated. But why I also say that you have to really make your voices known. I'm gonna be going around to MPs and absolutely grilling them on this stuff because I'm sick of this shit, bro. You can't tell me in any
100%.
normal civilization, in normal country, that you have people that are working with another country that don't get investigated or removed instantly after they're even accused of it. Like they did
My
this. They
friend.
literally tried to do this to Michael Chung, who's like a conservative guy, and they didn't tell him. They knew it was happening, didn't tell him, and then allowed it to get out into the public. And then it's unbelievable the amount of corruption, incompetence, and now probably treason that this government is guilty of is almost unfathomable. It's unbelievable. And what it's going to take is that the whole country needs to be like, yo, you idiots need to go, because you can't tell me that anybody in this country that has two brain cells to rub together is like, yeah, it's okay that they're working with another country for our detriment, for their benefit. Like it's insane. and there's
But
people still defending that. It's
this
unbelievable.
is Monday's show was kind of the essence of that show was, if we're going to use these words in the public space, let's use them to accurate effect and apply
Yeah.
them by definition. So I gave the
Yes.
definitions of political interference, meddling, treason, these things. So we've got
Yeah.
the textbook definitions to reference from. And now instead of asking who the 11 are, we should be looking at who are all of the ones doing the intervening and apply that to those
Yeah.
lenses. But unfortunately, then we have to look at all 338, which in some capacity will fall under some of this kind of scrutiny. And this is why we have such paralysis and paranoia, and what I believe is the most effective opportunity for us right now in leveraging this Overton window into
Hmm.
understanding. And this is what I've been pushing hard on all week, everywhere I'm talking, speaking, and engaging, is understanding you cannot talk about these discussions only in the context of India or China
Yeah.
without adding Davos and Geneva and New York and Brussels to this conversation.
Yeah.
That is impossible. That makes us an even greater laughing stock and a greater insult to every single Canadian. This is where the foreign influence really truly is. So when we see the liberals coming out and going, "Oh yeah, maybe we should have a public inquiry on this," it's literally so that they can control the narrative in a public inquiry, because every
Yeah.
single one of them is allowed to lie to you in a public inquiry if it's a matter of national importance. This is why we need a different way of doing this.
Yeah.
Yes, a judicial inquiry is tougher for them to lie to, but we don't exactly get all of the results made public. So
No,
we
it's got to
have
be a
to demand.
public investigation. No, no, we need
Yes.
inquisition.
Absolutely. So we've covered so much here, Bryce, tonight.
Man,
Thanks
time flies.
for that. And time does fly. And I think we're gonna. We were talking about it for everybody that's out there just a little bit before we got started here. Kind of get to some measurable information for everybody moving forward, so we can kind of, the community here can gauge it in their own timeline, week by week
Hmm.
by week. Where I brought up, 30 days and 90 days, those kinds of things, we can start to look at some of the metrics that will help you guys understand how to make better moves more effectively, more efficiently, and I think more expeditiously. So thanks for coming again tonight, Brightons, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Big, a lot of stuff to digest. There's some comments coming in here last second. Fantastic. Uh, um, Next week, there's going to be some. I Planomi are asking me about some of the shows that I've got coming up in the next couple of weeks. Going, Wayne, do you really want to do that? Bill C-63 is coming, and they've probably already got your name on a gulag. They've already silenced us on permanently for streaming on Facebook, so they're really kind of hitting us hard. But you know what, guys? As long as we're in this together and we have people that occasionally give a little bit through donate at whatsupcanada.org or through buy me a coffee that enable me to do this and to keep this free for everybody, I think I'm going to keep doing it, because I know for a fact that we are having an effect. So it's time to hit the gas, folks, on what we're doing. I think that we've got them right where we want them, on the ropes, and we have hit the turning point, the beginning of the turning point of change. And I think the victories are going to start stacking up. So stay strong, my friends. Stay mighty, my fellow hostages. Thank you from wherever you're tuning in from, and we will see you same time, same place next Monday. All right. I love you all. Bye for now.
In times of global instability, soaring inflation and massive debt, gold and silver have proven to be unshakable pillars of wealth. New World Precious Metals, based in Calgary, Canada, is a leading international brokerage. We offer an easy, secure, and cost-effective platform for investing in gold and silver, including our international wholesale program and registered retirement savings accounts. Protect your money outside traditional banking with our physical precious metals, privately vaulted outside the banking system, at secure, insured exchanges worldwide. Gold and silver have been trusted assets for generations, with current projections indicating high returns. And with unprecedented demand from governments, banks, and investors, there are now shortages. Precious metals thrive during inflation, geopolitical instability, and currency devaluation. Sound familiar? Now is the time to invest in gold and silver, whether in your international investment account or by transferring registered retirement savings accounts. Experience the security of physical precious metals, combining the safety of physical assets with the flexibility of being like your own bank, offering instant liquidity and a financed line of credit. With precious metals on the rise, don't miss this generational opportunity to protect your wealth. At New World Precious Metals, we ensure your wealth meets its potential. Contact us today and our personal brokers will guide you every step of the way.